With us now, we have Bob Good, Republican congressional candidate in the 5th District. This is one of, this is just one of the districts that we absolutely have to retain. We have to win this year if we want to take back control of the House of Representatives. Holding on to the 5th District is essential. Bob Good is with us here today. Bob, how are you doing?
Good morning, Nick. Great to be with you. Congrats on your opportunity to host the show, and congrats on your recent nomination, your recent victory in the convention as well.
No, thank you very much, Bob. I appreciate it, and congratulations to you as well. I know it was, nominating contests are always tough. And it's always important for everyone. As tough as it is sometimes, it's always important for everyone to come together once they're over in order to keep their eye on the ball and keep their eye on, really why we're doing this in the first place. And just tell us a little bit. I mean, I know you've talked a lot about this during the nominating contest, but, obviously we're facing a lot of issues right now in this country. What do you see as some of the key issues that you really want to address in Congress?
Well, you're right about what you said about the nomination, Nick. There's a biblical principle there for us, and we both went through this, but iron sharpens iron. And so that's a preparing time. It's a widowing time. And you're right. We've got to come together. It's critical that Republicans take back the House this fall, and winning back the 7th, retaining the 5th where I am are critical for us, for our objectives to take back the House and to give the president the support that he needs in Congress. As we both know, this is really, it's not hyperbole. You cannot overstate. This is the most important election of our lifetime. And it's really, I don't think there's been a time where we've had a greater contrast in what the parties stand for, what the Republican Party is about versus the Democrat Party. And it really is unprecedented that we're having to debate the issues that we are. It's really incredible. The socialist bent of the left of the Democrat Party, what's driving that party. In this election, Nick, as you know, we've got a choice as to whether or not we're going to celebrate America. Do we value what we stand for as a country and who we are as a country, or do we want to destroy America?
No, I think you bring up an important point here, because there's this idea that, everyone acknowledges that, my gosh, America is not a perfect country. We don't have a perfect history. We have some really, really bad portions of our history. But this idea that we are apparently the only country, and this has been so prominent on the left lately, that apparently we're the only country in the world that has to be exclusively defined by bad points in our history, and we don't get to take any credit for any sort of the struggle or sacrifices that happen in order to make the country a better place. They certainly don't hold communist regimes or socialist regimes or Venezuela or Cuba or the Chinese government to that standard. It's apparently only us that are held to the standard of that, and I think that's interesting, because it really has become fundamental. Do you want to? Is your goal to save America, or is your goal to destroy it and rebuild it a different way? And I feel like more and more that is a genuine contrast, and I wouldn't have said that 10, 15 years ago.
You're exactly right, Nick. Conservatives believe that good things are not easily created, but they're easily destroyed. And we're seeing that in our country today. And we believe that there are things about America that make America good, that make America great, that are worth preserving, that we've got to build upon. Like you said, we're imperfect people, so obviously we have imperfect history. But in this election, are we going to support the rule of law? Are we going to support our law enforcement? Are we going to support those folks who go to work every day, literally putting their lives on the line, literally leaving the home, wondering if they'll come back safely at the end of the day? To think that we have a nation divided, at least politically, when it comes to parties, where we've got the same people, Nick, as you know, who are encouraging this violence throughout our cities, these attacks on law enforcement. These same people are the ones who want to defund the police. They want to defund Border Patrol, and then they want to take away our ability to defend ourselves as citizens. They want to take away our Second Amendment rights, and these same people are the ones who are living in the gated communities with their armed guards, and yet they want to take away our ability to defend ourselves, and they want to abdicate the number one responsibility of government, which is to protect its citizens.
Well, and I think you bring up a really good point here, is that, and again, the press tries to do this, and it's just so frustrating to me. It's this idea that Republicans are lumping all protesters into the same group. It's like, no, actually, the Republicans I've seen, the comments I've made, the comment you just made, the comments the president has made, no, we fully recognize that in a lot of these areas, you have these almost like professional groups that are coming in, whether it was in Seattle or in Portland, you saw it in Richmond, you saw it in Milwaukee, Minneapolis. You have professional elements that are coming in, and they are trying to co-opt protests and turn them into riots. And then the moment that you say, wait a second, that rioting is wrong, they want to lump it in as if you're condemning the entire concept. It's like, no, it's, I saw in my own community, we had 2 protests, and they were passionate, and they were, definitely adamant about what they wanted and clear on their objectives, but nobody got hurt because we have a strong sense of community within that environment where we're willing to peacefully agree and disagree, as the situation dictates. But this idea that, you have this coercive element and this subversive element, which sees and which lobs onto any sort of opportunity they see with something like this. So you can have a perfectly genuine and a perfectly justified protest, and they see it as an opportunity to destroy and tear down, because ultimately their objective has nothing to do with the purpose of the protest. It is about fundamentally changing things. Let me ask you another question here real quick, because I do think the security and safety of our communities is really important. The other thing, too, the issue that is really popping up that I see a lot of people concerned about has to do with education.
Right.
And, obviously we have a population that we're very used to this time of year. Here we are in August, right? People are returning from their family vacations. Their work schedule's, about to pick back up, and they're about to go drop their kids off at the bus or at the school and then head off to work. And now all of a sudden, that's not going to happen. And I know for a long time I've argued, and we've talked about this before, this is one of the problems that you have, not when the government is fostering education, but when the government is sensing or is attempting to micromanage education. And so what do you see? What do you see, especially from the federal side? What do you see as the federal government's role in this?
Well, a great question, Nick. And I think that it's clear that the thing about a crisis like we're going through now with the pandemic, it exacerbates or illustrates or exaggerates, exposes your weaknesses, as a country. Whether you're talking about the need to protect our borders, to reform immigration, to protect, who's coming into our country as a national security issue, economic issue, as well as a healthcare issue, the risk of global dependency, the threat of China, the problems with government healthcare, the fiscal challenges that we face that make it difficult to address the crisis, but also to your point on education. Our weaknesses or our struggles with education are exposed here. We've got to do more to support families, to support parents when it comes to education. I think it's a real problem, to your question, that the federal government control of education and the federal government's just overwhelming role in controlling education. I would actually be in favor of eliminating the Department of Education. I think it's bad enough that we have Richmond telling local communities how to run their schools, what to teach in their schools, and how to operate their schools. And government is best, as we both know, when it's retained at the local level. And local parents, local families should have control over their children's education. We need to do more to support homeschool families, to support private school families, to support families who want to sacrifice to educate their children in those methods. We also need to have school choice. I think it's great. Some of these states, and to your point about what the federal government can do, the federal government can encourage education savings accounts. You've got about a half a dozen states where when parents choose to pull their kids out of the for whatever reason, family decision to pull their kids out of government schools, public schools, and to place them to homeschooling, which is going to grow. I think we're all convinced is going to continue to grow coming out of the crisis. When parents are increasingly frustrated with what's being offered or what's being taught, or the worldview, if you will, that's in the public schools, and want to sacrifice to put their kids in private or Christian education, we need to come alongside and support those parents. And education savings accounts, which are you have in only about a half a dozen states, are where parents can use those tax dollars that are allocated by the government, the state and the federal government, those dollars into an education savings account that they can utilize for their kids' education. And we need to look to encourage states to do that. And while I realize that's mostly a state role, The federal government can encourage and support that. The federal government can do it for the district, for D.C., which is spending some $20,000 per kid on education, the public school system. The federal government can do it to support military families, Nick, because education dissatisfaction is being shown, and gosh, you having served so nobly as a Green Beret, have a special place in your heart, of course, for military families. But the federal government can support education options, savings accounts for military families, I think would be within the role of the federal government to do that, as well as on Indian reservations. I think those are three areas that the federal government could specifically be involved while supporting states in offering that to families as well.
Well, no, and I think, it's interesting when we talk about, every time we talk about anything to do with school choice, I had someone ask me the other day, like, so you want to divert funds away from public education? And I said, let me ask a question. Is the purpose of government subsidizing education, is the purpose to finance, quote, public education, or is it to finance the education of the public? Because
That's right.
if it's all about, the only solution we're going to offer is the one that the government controls and manages and administers. Okay, that is one way to educate the public. But there's another way to educate the public, and that is to allow dollars to follow students. It's allow people to actually have some choice. And it's amazing because a lot of times people hammer on me. They're like, oh, well, since you're a Christian, you're just talking about Christian school or parochial school. I'm like, look, I'm talking about choice. I'm talking about you getting, I hear people all the time. I have some liberal friends that say, they're really upset that the football team at the public high school gets funded, but the arts department doesn't. And I like to go back. I'm like, well, that's because you've chosen a method of schooling where the decisions about what the emphasis will be on is not made by you. And they're like, well, what's the alternative? I say, great question. Because if you were controlling where those dollars were spent and your child had a real passion for the arts or music or theater and had a real gift that you wanted your child's education to be able to develop, and you had control over how your education dollars were spent, you could direct them to an academy or a school that put more emphasis on that. But because you have essentially elected to allow the government to make those decisions on your behalf, well, then don't be surprised when you lose what you really love because 51%.
You don't like those decisions.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's an excellent point that, we're not trying to cut spending from education. We want an education system that is as diverse as the student body it's trying to serve. And I don't see how you get that with government micromanagement, especially not at the federal level. Go
ahead.
No, please, go ahead.
Competition is almost always good. We certainly believe that. Choice is almost, is good. And in a constitutional republic, we believe in those freedoms. And again, I think there's a greater interest ever now that's going to be in school choice options coming out of the pandemic as parents look at what are the best options for their children. Most schools, or most states rather now, have charter schools. I think that's a good thing. I think that needs to expand and to grow. About half the schools have school voucher programs. Unfortunately, Virginia does not have that. But you're exactly right. Choice, competition is healthy. It's good. We want to support our public schools. We want to support what's going to be the vast majority of kids are going to receive their education that way. But choice and competition is good for parents. It's good for families. And it's good for kids.
I think the other group, too, that it really ends up benefiting is teachers.
That's right.
When I first got elected to the House, and I'm sure you've had these conversations as well, the first time teachers wanted to sit down and meet with me, I mean, it was like we were meeting in a secure facility. They didn't want they didn't want anybody to know that they were talking with an elected representative because they were afraid of potential backlash for that. And I thought
I saw that on the county level.
Yeah, and I thought it was going to be that's right, because you've served on the local government level. I thought this was going to be a conversation about teacher pay. In an hour and a half long conversation, these teachers did not bring up teacher pay one time. They spent 90% of the time talking about their problems with having to spend 20, 30, 40% of their time complying with state and federal mandates. And the rest of the time having to teach towards some standardized test and not being able to adjust their schedule, not being able to adjust their workflow in order to incorporate teachable moments. And so I think because I know that, I'll tell you this much, Bob, and I'm sure you're the same way. If I'm the one directing the dollars for my students' education, I'm not going to the school with the most administrators or the biggest buildings. I'm going to the one that treats the teachers the best because they're the one, that's where the rubber meets the road in my child's education. But you're not going to get that with trying to pull all the strings from Richmond or D.C.
Yeah, I had the same thing happen to me when I was serving the Board of Supervisors in Campbell, where I would get these anonymous letters or private conversations with teachers who wanted me to know how it really worked in the system, if you will. And we're right. While we want to do more to support our teachers, along with law enforcement, along with public safety on the local government level, but it's not just all about pay. There are other things that we can do to improve the educational experience for our kids and to direct more money to where it really makes a difference. And that should be our priority. It should always be about the kids. And school choice is about the kids. If you have the kid's best interest in mind, more choice is certainly for the kids and the parents.
Well, we're coming up on a break here. I just want to tell everybody who's listening, because there's going to be some people that are watching this either online or through the app that live in the 5th District, and the 5th District is out kind of more in the Western Virginia, and right in between the 9th and the 6th, which is southwest in the valley. It's kind of right there along the Piedmont, going all the way from the border of North Carolina all the way up to Fauquier County in the north.
Right.
But look, how do people learn more about your campaign, about where you stand on the issues, and most importantly, how do they help you? Because as I said before, we have to retain the 5th District. Absolutely have to retain it. There's no way to take back the House of Representatives, I can see, if we're not holding the ground that we've already fought so hard, and Bob's out there working every day to make that happen. So, Bob, tell us a little bit more about where people can learn more about you and where they can donate.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, you're exactly right. The 5th District is a top 10 hold for us as Republicans. We got to keep this seat. I'm a bright red biblical and constitutional conservative, and I will stand bold with conviction on the things that matter to conservatives and Republicans. But they can support me and learn more about my campaign at bobgoodforcongress.com. That's Bob Good, just G-O-O-D, no E in good. Bob Good, F-O-R, for Congress.com. Thank you, Nick. Great to be with you. Great job today, and continue to wish you well and pray for you as you fight for the 7th District to take it back for conservatives.
You too, Bob. Keep fighting out there on the 5th, and we'll definitely be staying in touch throughout the campaign.